Welcome to the Deep Dives, where we take a stack of information, could be articles, research, maybe even your own notes, and we really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge.
Think of it like your personal shortcut to getting properly informed.
Exactly. Today, we're doing a deep dive into an IELTS reading guide. Now, whether you're actually prepping for that exam, or maybe you just want to sharpen your critical reading skills generally, or you're just curious how these complex tests work, this guide is packed. Really packed with surprising facts and practical tips. We're going to get into what the IELTS reading test is really about and how you can approach it strategically. Unlock some secrets, maybe.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, I think, is how this guide takes something that feels, pretty daunting for a lot of people, this high-stakes language test, and it just breaks it down meticulously into manageable bits.
Right.
So for you, the learner, wanting to get knowledge quickly but also thoroughly, understanding the mechanics, the nuts and bolts of a test like IELTS is just invaluable.
It's more than just language, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just general English proficiency. It's about a very specific set of reading and comprehension skills that they systematically check. This dive should give you those aha moments, the ones you need to feel confident, prepared, without getting totally swamped by all the info.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The IELTS reading test. It's a 1-hour sprint. 60 minutes. That's it. And, crucially, the guide points out, no extra time given for transferring your answers. What you manage in that hour is final.
That's a key detail right there. Easy to forget under pressure.
So in that intense hour, what exactly is it assessing? What skills are they looking for?
Okay, so the guide lays out 7 different skills, 7 distinct abilities, and interestingly, it highlights vocabulary knowledge as like a foundational strength across all of them.
Makes sense. Vocabulary is pretty fundamental.
It really is. So let's walk through them quickly. First, understanding key ideas, basically finding the main point, the core argument, often tested with multiple choice or matching headings to paragraphs.
Getting the gist.
Exactly. Second, scanning and skimming. These are your time-saving heroes, really. Crucial for avoiding mistakes when the clock's ticking.
We'll definitely need to talk more about those later.
For sure. Third skill, combining information. This pops up in summary completion or matching features questions. They're checking if you can connect details from different parts of the text. Synthesize,
Okay.
pulling it together.
Precisely. Fourth, showing an eye for detail. This is about spotting specific bits, data, terms, names, facts, arguments. Often use those true, false, not given questions.
Ah, yes, the tricky ones.
They can be. The guide notes that challenge is distinguishing false, contradicted by the text, from not given, simply not mentioned. Big difference.
Got it. What's next?
Fifth, understanding visual information. Think diagram label completion. Connecting text info to a visual representation. Sixth, reading between the lines. Understanding implied meaning, what's suggested but not explicitly stated. Tested with yes, not given.
So inference skills. Spot on, like knowing a friend's upset even if they say, I'm fine. You're reading the subtext. And finally, 7th, analyzing the text. This needs a deeper dive into the passage to pick out different viewpoints or perspectives, often assessed by matching viewpoints, questions.
Okay, 7 skills. That's quite a list. Now, here's something I found really interesting. The test has 3 passages, right? Each with a mix of these question types.
Yeah.
How do those passages differ? Are they all the same difficulty?
Good question. No, they're not quite the same. The guide says the first 2 passages are usually descriptive, detailing info and facts, maybe on social or work topics, generally a bit more accessible.
Okay.
But the 3rd passage, that one tends to be more argumentative. It presents a more complex, maybe more abstract topic.
So the difficulty ramps up.
It often does, yeah. And the guide actually categorizes passages into 4 types you might see. You've got descriptive, like we said, events, objects, places. Then passages needing assessment of an argument, focusing on opinions. 3rd, factual information passages, lots of detail, testing memory. And 4th, discursive passages, arguments, discussions, needing you to follow a complex train of thought.
Right. So knowing the passage type might influence how you read it.
Exactly. A slightly different approach for each.
Okay. And the questions themselves. We mentioned some types, but the guide lists 6 main varieties. What are they?
Yeah, the common formats. First, standard, multiple choice. Select the best answer, testing specifics like data, ideas, opinions.
Pretty standard test stuff.
Right. Second, identifying information. Those true, false, not given ones we mentioned, or the yes, not given variation for opinions, really tests understanding of details and arguments. Third, matching information. Often matching names of experts, maybe, to their specific views mentioned in the text. Tests if you can differentiate perspectives. Fourth, matching headings, pairing headings with paragraphs or sections, all about understanding the main idea, the gist of each part.
Getting the structure.
Exactly. Fifth, matching features. Matching statements to a list of options. The guide notes this is more common in the general test, not so much the academic one. Often involves connecting several pieces of info to, say, different people or concepts mentioned.
Right.
And finally, sixth, summary completion. Filling gaps in a summary, notes, a table, maybe a flowchart. Assesses main ideas or specific details. And a variation is diagram label completion, filling gaps on pictures.
Wow. Okay. A lot of different ways to test those 7 skills.
Grab on you peeps on your toes.
And just to hammer home the need for accuracy, the guide includes a score conversion. Getting 39 or 40 right gives you that top band 9, but it drops off pretty fast. 23 to 26 correct answers is only about 6.
Yeah, that really highlights that every single answer counts. There's not much room for error if you're aiming high.
Which naturally brings us to strategy under pressure.
Yeah.
How do you tackle this effectively?
Well, the first, maybe most fundamental piece of advice the guide stresses is read the instructions very carefully.
Sounds basic, but critical.
Absolutely critical. It says failure here can significantly lower your score, maybe even lead to a really poor mark. People skip instructions under pressure, but it's a massive own goal.
Okay, read the instructions, got it. So for you, the test taker, in the room, clock ticking, what else? One tip that jumped out at me was, do not expect to understand every word. That feels counterintuitive for a language test, doesn't it?
It does, but it's vital. Remember that 1-hour sprint? There's simply no time to get bogged down on every unfamiliar word you'd never finish.
So focus on the key stuff.
Exactly. Focus on the information you need to answer the questions. The guide gives practical tips here, like looking out for questions about names, places, numbers. Those answers are often easier to scan for.
Right, easier to spot.
Yeah. And here's a real game changer, something the guide points out that can make a huge difference.
The one.
The answers to the questions generally appear in order in the passage.
Wait, seriously? In sequence. So the answer to question 5 will be physically after the answer to question 4 in the text.
That's what the guide says, generally speaking, yes.
Wow. That changes everything. I bet loads of people jump around rereading everything.
I think they do. But knowing this means you can use a more linear approach. Find answer 4, then start looking for answer 5 from that point onwards. It stops you wasting time rereading earlier sections. Huge time saver.
That feels like a proper insider tip. Okay, another big one that also feels weird. Ignore anything you already know about the topic. Why? And how hard is that to actually do?
It is hard, definitely. But it's crucial because the test only assesses your understanding of the provided text. Your own amazing knowledge on, say, climate change might be factually correct in the real world, but if the passage presents a slightly different angle or detail, you must answer based only on the passage. Using outside knowledge, even if correct, can lead you to the wrong answer if it's not in the text.
Stick to the script, basically.
Stick strictly to the text provided. And on that note, for questions with options like multiple choice, the guide advises, if you see an answer that's clearly wrong, cross it out immediately. Narrow down your choices, improves your odds.
Makes sense. But what about when you just hit a really tough question? It's easy to panic, right?
Totally easy to panic. The guide's advice is clear. Don't. It acknowledges some questions are simple, others are designed to be very difficult.
Okay, so expect variation.
Yes. And if a question feels too hard, don't let it derail you. Don't waste minutes agonizing over it. Either make your best educated guess then and there, or mark it, move on, and come back if you have time at the end.
Protect your momentum.
Exactly. Protect your time and your confidence. And linked to this time pressure is the transfer stage. The guide warns that people often spend too long reading and answering, leaving too little time to carefully transfer answers to the answer sheet. Mistakes happen here.
Oh, I can see that. Rushing at the end.
Yeah. So the advice is practice timing this whole process. Allocate specific chunks of time in your practice sessions, maybe 16, 17 mins for reading, answering a section, then 3-4 mins just for transferring and checking those answers.
Build the transfer time into your plan.
Absolutely. And one final, really critical piece of advice.
Yes.
Never leave blanks.
Never. Why is that so bad?
Because your score is based purely on the number of correct answers. There's no penalty for wrong answers, but a blank guarantees 0 marks for that question.
Right, a guess at least has a chance.
Exactly. Even a random guess on a multiple choice gives you, what, a 25% chance? Always better than 0. The strategy is eliminate the obviously wrong options, then make your best guess from what's left. Never, ever leave a blank space. It's just throwing away potential marks.
Okay, solid test day advice. But what about the preparation before you get there? Building the skills. The guide mentions two key reading techniques.
Yes, the foundation stones, scanning and skimming.
We touched on them earlier. Can you elaborate?
Sure, scanning is like using a searchlight. You're looking for specific information, quickly, keywords from the question, names, dates, numbers. You sweep your eyes across the text, not reading every word, just hunting for those targets.
Finding the needle in the haystack fast.
Pretty much. Skimming, though, is more about getting the overall picture, the main idea of each paragraph. The guide points out the topic sentence, usually the first sentence, sometimes the last, often gives you this main idea. Skimming helps you quickly grasp the structure and decide which paragraphs need closer reading for which questions.
So they're different but complementary skills.
Absolutely. You need both.
And it's not just about being fast, is it? The guide mentions balancing speed with accuracy.
Yes, this is crucial. Reading faster definitely gives you an edge time-wise. Practice helps build speed, but speed is useless if you miss crucial details.
Right. Fast and wrong doesn't help.
Not at all. So the guide stresses, work on picking up detail while increasing speed. Monitor your mistakes in practice. Why did you miss that detail? How can you avoid that next time? It takes conscious effort and time, but it's essential.
Quality first, then speed.
Kind of. The suggestion is, when you start practice tests, maybe allow yourself a bit extra time, say 30% more, to focus on accuracy. Then, as you get better, gradually reduce that extra time until you're hitting the real 60-minute target consistently.
Okay, that makes sense. And the timing breakdown for practice.
Yeah, for the 3 sections, 40 questions total, the aim is roughly 20 minutes per section.
Right.
And within that 20 minutes, maybe aim for 16 or 17 minutes to actually read the passage and answer the questions for that section.
Reading.
Leaving those crucial 3 or 4 minutes at the end of each section, specifically for transferring your answers carefully to the answer sheet and doing a quick check.
Building in that transfer time again. Very practical.
It has to be part of the plan. Now, connecting this all to the bigger picture, the guide doesn't just leave you with techniques. It points towards a whole load of resources out there.
Oh, good. What kind of things?
All sorts, really. It lists YouTube channels with specific tips, IELTS apps for practice like Total IELTS Reading Practice or IELTS Reading Tests. There are podcasts, too, like IELTSpodcast.com/reading.
So resources for different learning styles.
Exactly. And lots of websites offering free practice materials, strategies, tips. Sites like IELTSadvantage.com, IELTSliz.com are mentioned. Basically, a whole ecosystem of support.
That's really good to know. It's clear that for you, the learner listening, there's a ton of help available to really master these skills. So there we have it. A proper deep dive into the IELTS reading test. We've unpacked its structure, looked at the skills it tests, shared some key strategies for test day, and outlined effective ways to prepare.
Yeah, we've covered a lot from those 7 core skills right through to time management hacks like the answers in order thing and knowing where to find more help.
Our hope is that this whole discussion gives you some solid, tangible actions and, a clearer path forward if you're facing this test, or even just want to improve your reading analysis skills.
Definitely. And remember, the skills you hone for a test like IELTS, things like quickly discerning key ideas, scanning effectively, understanding what's implied, managing time under pressure, these aren't just exam skills. They're incredibly valuable way beyond that.
That's a great point.
So maybe something to think about is, how could you apply these sharpened reading and analytical skills to just the daily flood of information we all face? Could it help you cut through the noise in news articles, reports, even long work emails to really grasp what matters? Something to mull over, perhaps, as you continue your own learning journey.